For as long as humanity has existed, the open ocean has been executing us. The Mediterranean swallowed Phoenician fleets and spit their timbers across the shore. The Atlantic crushed the Spanish Armada and scattered an empire's invincibility across the seafloor. The Pacific consumed the Polynesian wayfarers who miscalculated a current and were never heard from again. Every coastal civilization in recorded history has confronted the same brutal arithmetic. The ocean is not a place you inhabit, it is a place you survive passing through. Attempts to defy this principle have littered the centuries with wreckage. In 1972, a libertarian millionaire dumped sand and concrete onto the Minerva Reefs in the South Pacific and declared a sovereign nation. Tonga sent a gunboat, ripped down the flag, and the reef swallowed the remains. A retired British major occupied a rusting Second World War gun platform in the North Sea and proclaimed it the Principality of Sealand. It remains a corroding steel skeleton, unrecognized by every government on Earth. An American consortium spent 2 decades promoting the Freedom Boat Ship, a mile-long floating city designed to cruise the planet indefinitely. Its $11 billion price tag and the basic physics of open ocean wave stress killed it before a single hull plate was cut. The ocean does not negotiate. It does not share territory. It dissolves ambition the way salt dissolves iron. Every rational assessment of building a permanent human settlement on the open sea produces one inescapable conclusion: abandon the idea. The engineering obstacles are not difficult. They are categorically hostile. Saltwater corrodes unprotected structural steel at rates of up to 0.5 millimeter per year, meaning a load-bearing beam loses measurable strength within a decade. Chloride ions from seawater penetrate reinforced concrete, attack the embedded steel, and cause it to expand, crack, and spall from the inside out like a slow-motion implosion. Biofouling, the relentless colonization of every submerged surface by barnacles, mussels, algae, and microbial biofilms, adds tons of parasitic weight, increases drag forces, and accelerates corrosion through localized acid production. And then there are the waves. A Category 5 hurricane generates sustained wave heights exceeding 30 meters, walls of moving water that exert forces measured in hundreds of tons per square meter against anything foolish enough to stand in their path. The cost of fighting this environment is not high, it is perpetual. But in 2018, a blue tech startup called OCEANIX, co-founded by Mark Collins Chen and backed by the United Nations Human Settlements Program, announced that they would do what every previous attempt at ocean habitation had failed to achieve. They would not build a platform. They would not anchor a barge. They would construct an entire floating city, a modular, self-sustaining, climate-resilient urban community designed to house 12,000 people on interconnected hexagonal platforms anchored to the seafloor off the coast of Busan, South Korea. The architectural visionary behind the design was Bjarke Ingels, the Danish architect whose firm, BIG, had already redefined the boundaries of urban ambition with projects from Copenhagen to Manhattan. The engineering partner was Samu, the design arm of Samsung. The political sponsor was the United Nations itself. This was not a libertarian fantasy scrawled on a napkin. This was a consortium of global institutions declaring that the future of human civilization might not be on land at all, but floating above the abyss. This is the story of how the most powerful architectural, technological, and political forces on the planet joined forces to attempt what the ocean has been violently rejecting for all of recorded history: the construction of a permanent, inhabited city on the surface of the sea, pouring hundreds of millions of dollars into the water, and discovering that the gap between a revolutionary blueprint and a functioning civilization on the waves may be the widest, most unforgiving chasm in the history of engineering. To grasp the sheer hostility of the environment they are attempting to colonize, strip away every drone-shot rendering and every architect's watercolor. The waters off Busan, in the Korea Strait, are not a placid lagoon. They are a corridor where the Pacific Ocean funnels between the Japanese archipelago and the Korean peninsula with grinding, seasonal violence. Typhoon season, which stretches from June through November, routinely sends storms with sustained winds exceeding 120 miles per hour and wave heights of 15 meters tearing through the strait. Typhoon Hinnamnor in 2022 was the most powerful tropical cyclone ever recorded in the Korea Strait, producing catastrophic flooding, wind destruction, and storm surges that overwhelmed coastal defenses across the Busan metropolitan area. The seawater temperature oscillates between near freezing in winter and over 25 degrees Celsius in summer, a thermal swing that accelerates material fatigue in every exposed component. And beneath the surface, the biochemistry is relentless. The warm, nutrient-rich waters of the strait breed marine organisms at ferocious speed, coating every submerged surface with centimeters of biological crust within weeks, adding weight, trapping moisture, and creating micro-environments of accelerated corrosion that no coating can permanently defeat. This is not a controlled marina. This is open combat with one of the most biologically and meteorologically aggressive marine environments in the Western Pacific. The desperation propelling this project is not theoretical. It is demographic, geographic, and existential. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change projects that global mean sea levels will rise between 44 and 76 centimeters by the end of this century under medium emissions scenarios, and high-impact projections involving rapid ice sheet collapse push that figure past 2 meters. By 2050, an estimated 800 million to 1 billion people living in low-lying coastal cities will be critically vulnerable to flooding, storm surges, and permanent inundation. Jakarta is sinking so catastrophically, some districts dropping 30 centimeters per year due to groundwater extraction, that Indonesia is relocating its entire capital. Dhaka faces the submersion of up to 18% of Bangladesh's coastal territory. Shanghai, Miami, Lagos, Ho Chi Minh City, the list of megacities facing existential water threats reads like a roll call of global economic power. OCEANIX Busan is not a vanity project. It is a prototype, a proof-of-concept laboratory designed to answer a question that will define the 21st century. When the land runs out, can we build civilization on the water? The engineering weapon designed to answer that question is unlike anything marine construction has ever attempted at the urban scale. The OCEANIX system is built around interconnected, hexagonal floating platforms, each one a self-contained neighborhood module anchored to the seafloor, but designed to rise and fall with tidal fluctuations and storm surges, absorbing rather than resisting the ocean's vertical fury. The initial prototype covers 6.3 hectares, approximately 15.5 acres, organized into purpose-specific maritime neighborhoods for living, research, and lodging, all linked together and connected to land via articulating link-span bridges. Buildings are restricted to a maximum of 7 stories to minimize wind resistance and lower the center of gravity, reducing the risk of catastrophic capsizing during typhoon conditions. Beneath the platforms, the design integrates bio-rock reef systems, electrified mineral accretion structures that attract marine organisms and accelerate coral growth, transforming the underside of the city from a dead surface into an active habitat regeneration zone. The vision is not merely to survive the ocean, it is to make the ocean complicit in the city's existence. The numbers, even for a prototype, fracture the imagination. The initial phase is designed to accommodate 12,000 residents and visitors on floating platforms tethered across an open marine environment. 6 integrated circular systems are engineered into the DNA of the city. Net zero energy, generated by floating and rooftop photovoltaic arrays. Closed-loop water treatment, including desalination and rainwater harvesting. Zero waste recycling and waste-to-resource processing. Hydroponic and aeroponic food production capable of feeding the community without a single acre of soil. Non-automotive mobility networks built around water-based transit, and coastal habitat regeneration beneath every platform. Early cost estimates placed the prototype at $200 million. As design specifications sharpened and maritime engineering realities set in, that figure climbed towards $600 million and climbing. Scale the concept to a full-size floating city of 100,000 inhabitants, and you are staring at an investment that dwarfs the budgets of most nations' entire infrastructure programs. The project's unveiling in April 2022 was greeted with a surge of euphoric, almost messianic optimism. The United Nations gave it its institutional blessing. Bjarke Ingels presented dazzling renders of sun-drenched hexagonal villages floating in crystalline water, rooftop gardens cascading over low-rise buildings, kayakers gliding through canals beneath solar-paneled canopies. Media coverage exploded across every continent. OCEANIX Busan was hailed as the solution to the climate crisis, a floating ark for a drowning planet. Politicians in Busan celebrated, investors circled. The prevailing mood was not cautious optimism, it was triumphant certainty. Humanity had designed the future, and the future floated. Then the ocean, the bureaucracy, and the economics began their coordinated assault. By 2025, reports emerged that the project had stalled. Political shifts within Busan's metropolitan government introduced new complications. The regulatory framework for a permanently inhabited floating structure, a category that existing maritime law and municipal building codes had never contemplated, proved agonizingly difficult to navigate. Who governs a floating city? What jurisdiction applies when a platform detaches from its mooring? How do you issue property titles for structures anchored above a seabed owned by the state? These were not engineering problems, they were civilizational puzzles with no precedent. Meanwhile, the engineering challenges mounted. Independent marine structural analysts raised pointed questions about the long-term viability of floating platforms in the Korea Straits typhoon corridor. The corrosion management budget alone, the cost of continuously inspecting, coating, and replacing structural steel in a warm water, saltwater environment, projected maintenance costs that could consume the operating revenue of the entire community. Offshore maintenance is estimated at 15 to 20 times the cost of equivalent work performed in a dry dock. And the social question loomed largest of all. Could a city built from scratch, on water, with no organic history, no inherited culture, no centuries of accumulated human complexity, ever function as a genuine community? Or would it remain, forever, an elaborate, floating experiment with no soul? Fast forward to the present moment. OCEANIX Busan remains in a state of ambitious limbo, a prototype that has captured the imagination of the entire planet but has not yet placed a permanent resident on a single floating platform. And across the Indian Ocean, a parallel effort tells the same story, with different geography. The Maldives Floating City, a $1 billion partnership between the Maldivian government and Dutch Docklands, was designed to float 5,000 residential units, housing 20,000 people across a 200-hectare lagoon, its hexagonal layout inspired by the geometry of brain coral. As of late 2025, large-scale construction had not materialized, and the original 2027 completion date appeared increasingly fictional. The ocean does not operate on human timelines, it operates on geological ones. The paradox is as vast as the ocean itself. To the architects and visionaries who designed it, OCEANIX Busan is a lifeboat for a species running out of dry ground, a radical, necessary, beautiful answer to the most terrifying question of the 21st century. To the marine engineers who must make it survive, who must calculate wave slamming forces, model chloride diffusion rates through reinforced concrete, and design mooring systems elastic enough to absorb a Category 5 typhoon without snapping. It is something far more precarious, an experiment in asking the most corrosive, most violent, most biologically relentless environment on Earth to politely host 12,000 human lives. The distance between the architect's render and the marine engineer's stress calculation is an ocean in itself. Building on the sea has never been a question of technology. The technology exists. Offshore oil platforms have survived decades in waters far more hostile than the Korea Strait. The question has always been permanence, whether you can transform a survival platform into a living, breathing city, and whether you can do it at a cost that does not bankrupt the civilization you are trying to save. They have designed a city that rises with the tide, generates its own power, grows its own food, and cleans its own water. And the ocean has responded the way it has always responded to every structure, every ship, every reef, every continent it has ever touched, with salt, with storm, with pressure, and with time. Because sometimes drifting on the surface of the most indifferent force on the planet, tethered to the seafloor by cables that must hold against currents no engineer can fully predict, there is a quiet, extraordinary, unresolved gamble. A gamble between humanity's desperate need to find new ground as the old ground drowns beneath rising seas, the ocean's ancient, chemical, meteorological insistence that nothing permanent belongs on its surface, and the billions of dollars, the decades of effort, and the futures of a billion coastal lives that hang suspended in the narrow, corroding space between a revolutionary idea and the merciless reality of salt water.